Hi, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all the viewers. Welcome to our podcast today. We are on the 88th podcast on LinkedIn Live, and we are talking on the topic of succession, the truth of leaving a legacy, with Thomas, Rajiv, and Sunil joining us to discuss on the show. Rajiv, Thomas, Sunil, welcome to the show. Over to you people.
Thank you. Thank you, Prem.
Thank you, Prem. Hello, everyone. Today we're going to delve quite deeply into the concept of leaving a legacy and creating a legacy, actually, in management and its profound impact on organizational sustainability and even our own career. Uh, I think you can, from wherever you are in your career at the moment as a manager, begin to set a new culture. When we talk about legacy, we're not just talking about whether what we leave behind. What we're talking about is the lasting imprint we as a person, we as a manager, make in our organizations and the people that populate them. Legacy in management goes well beyond the short-term goals or financial successes that we might achieve. Hopefully, what you leave behind is a blueprint that others that follow you can use again and again to gradually build the organization that you have been in to all that it's capable of being. And if you do this repeatedly, then what begins to occur is that you create a kind of almost a hero culture around yourself, because people will see you came, you did good things, you recorded those good things for others to repeat, and you left. And sometimes I've been in organizations where even the name of a manager that left perhaps years before or even decades before is still used to describe how an organization does a thing in a particular area of their activity. Now, that's a massive, massive achievement, I think, because those individuals went on to greatly enhance careers because they could point to not only doing the job, but they could point to what they did, the practical steps they took to create more value, even after they'd gone. And I think that's a massive gift to those that follow and enables other people to reach their full potential. The contrast is that when people leave the organization, there's no handover, there's no connection between the person that left and the person that came to do the new job. It's a big problem, and organizational memory is quickly lost. And gradually, good things that used to be in the past are not replaced with better things that come in the future. They're simply replaced with different things that may not work as well. And gradually, things deteriorate. And where we get to eventually, we realize that about 68% of organizations are only achieving 16 to 25% of their potential. So there's a lot of ground that can be made up here, huge amount. So I'm going to stop there and maybe open to some questions from my colleagues. Welcome to Rajiv and Sunil. Good to have you here as always. And I know that your thoughtful questions will deepen our conversation for the benefit of our listeners.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. It's a very interesting and a very apt topic for all the managers, particularly in India. And we see lots of action going on the succession planning. So, Thomas, can you provide an example of a company whose legacy has significantly impacted its industry?
For sure. And the one that comes to mind is one, I think it was probably the best organization I ever worked for when I was an employed manager myself. And this was a telecommunications company that decided it would revolutionize its market position from an old kind of under-functioning, perhaps a national provider to becoming a modern, best functioning international blue chip company. And as it made its journey, one of the things it did was it invited its managers to to participate in what they called triangulated personal review. And what this involved was individuals um, pairing up with another elsewhere in the organization and maybe somewhere else in their team, it varied. And one person would go visit the other. And it'd be for maybe half a day or two-thirds of a day. But they would get the person they were visiting to show them everything they did. And the beauty of it was, ideally, these two people had similar roles. So they would learn what the other person was doing that worked really well. But also, in the telling of the story, they could spot any gaps or deficiencies that they knew about. So there was this kind of genuine sharing between colleagues. And then 3 months or 6 months later, they'd swap roles. And the person who had been visited the first time would then go and visit the person that reviewed their role. And what made it perfect, why it was called triangulated, is they then fed that output, which was usually a list of all the things that were working really well and a list of areas where things could be made to work better. So a list of improvements that could be made. And just that sharing gradually meant that each one of these people was able to build a personal handbook that almost perfected their role. And when they left that place, because obviously perfecting their role was a good thing to do, they were able to leave their handbook behind. So the person that took over could use all the good things that they developed to develop that area of activity. And it made a magnificent difference to the organization and to people's careers. So let me stop there. That's my favorite example, I think. And it impacted the whole of this international organization because it allowed them to occupy the top slot as the quality provider. Let me stop there.
Thomas, one more important aspect I would like to ask here that every leader is having own way of working, own style, own thought process, their own way of developing the succession plan, and the fact is that we all will leave some sort of legacy, even if we didn't plan for it. Then our legacy will be there, and that will be in the form of actions, form of behaviors, our approach towards others, teammates, colleagues, family members. So in this world, I think getting connected with like-minded people, experts across the globe, and work for a mission, a common goal, common objective, that is some sort of the connection and network people do, and that is a form of legacy for that leader. And as a part of our contribution, I will say that over 25 sessions, we are offering our session to more than 1,000 listeners. We are also offering at this discounted rate to offer personalized support to individuals, businesses, owners, and I will say this is legacy of significance. And we all three are doing, Thomas, Rajiv, and myself. Important aspect what I would like to ask here, that every leader leads with their own example, with their own action, with their own way of leading the things. Thomas, my question to you is that how can business owners, CEOs, or managers ensure that their personal values are integrated into the legacy they leave behind?
Sure. And that is a really, really big issue. And of course, none of what we talk about travels alone. Everything that we talk about travels in the context of using Regenesis over a period of time to move an organization from being perhaps already very good to becoming maybe the leaders of their field, the great. So moving from good to great and taking that kind of top position in the whole of their peers of organizations. What we're looking for is to become, for each organization to become all it's capable of being and to become as big as it's capable of being. Because if it's good, we want it to do a lot of work. We want it to serve a lot of people. We want it to serve a lot of B2B clients. So the personal values needs to be very much integrated with the company values. And so we would see this very much in the strategize kind of element. And in particular, in that telecoms industry I was talking about, that was the very first time that I saw Regenesis used. And indeed, they were doing strategize. This is where you do your mission, vision, values, vital few with every team. And this ensures that the corporate values and the variations of the corporate values that are necessary in different departments are all clearly established. So every manager knew they had to be integrated with that kind of common approach. And values, as you say, behaviors and the way people kind of follow through on things really matters, and the way they behave towards others really matters. So that really is where values show up.
Great. Thomas, I have another question for you. What advice do you have for managers who are just starting to consider their legacy? Because that's the point where they are most vulnerable and they are not very clear what they should do.
For sure, for sure. If there was one thing, I would say begin to build yourself a personal handbook about your role in the place that you are in now, and begin to figure out the key areas of the role. And in each key area of the role, what are the key actions that you take to make it work well? Now, if you take your kind of roll along the path that I've just suggested, and you have some kind of process, ideally triangulated review or something like that, where you gradually perfect the role and you perfect the whole area of activity of which you are a part, then your handbook can reflect all of that, so that as and when you move on, you're able to leave behind a legacy document that guides the incoming person on the things that really matter to the organization. So you don't all the time get this kind of disruption that occurs so often, where managers often say, well, we changed the manager and it was like a new broom came to sweep clean. The trouble with that approach is it often sweeps away a lot of good, as well as some stuff that needs changing. And there's no organizational memory. So actually you get this deterioration, although the intention is good from the new manager, it's not delivered. So this handover document that guides, continuity and legacy and succession, proper succession, is really powerful. So that would be my number one thing: is begin to pull together a summary personal handbook. It's almost like an extended job description or job effectiveness description, where it also contains the things that you have to deliver as well as the activities that you have to do. So I think that's a really big area, is kind of how you set about creating all that. But also, as we've said, within Regenesis and even within Common Sense, this also needs to be about long-term strategy versus short-term gains. And for sure, the organization needs to have done its work on its long-term strategy. The board needs to have done its work. The top team of the organization needs to have done its work, and then communicated that out to the organization, so that people can understand what short-term gains they need to deliver and where they need to focus right now, today and tomorrow, and this week and next week. As managers, we often find ourselves caught between the need for immediate results and the desire to build something enduring. And it's a continuous process. We have to keep reflecting, where are we going and what are we doing now? And sometimes it's essential to strike that balance between the short-term gains and the long-term strategy to ensure sustained success. So many times I've seen short-term gains, maybe there'll be a cost-cutting spree will break out in an organization, and they'll hack away not only unnecessary costs, but they'll take away capacity to deliver long-term success. Such a sad thing. And I think, if we have always prioritized short-termism, that can make organizations really suffer. So we always need to have the broader implications considered and decisions about the long-term strategy and viability. And as I say, doing any one of these activities on their own is not the way Regenesis works. This is about a cycle, an annual cycle of success, that gradually, it's like a spiral, an upward spiral of performance and growth and quality of activity that we're trying to essentially install in every organization with Regenesis, which is why we're spending time now networking it out through in as Sunil has said, it is important that people get the message of this. This is a highly simplified but very powerful sequence of adjustments that every organization can make, no matter how well they're doing. If they put the regenesis process in, they will do better.
Thomas, I have one question here. We are
Sure.
discussing very, very important topics, and with my experience, I can say that in today's world, the CEO is working under a lot of pressure. The pressure to deliver the short-term objective, and at the same time, they have to plan for the long-term strategy. So
Yeah.
sometimes they find a lot of pressure from the board members, particularly those board members who has come for the shorter period. They want to make money and they want to go out. So they are very much interested in this short-term objectives, some short-term goals. So can you suggest that how what you recommend that managers should how managers should prioritize long-term strategy without neglecting this short-term goals, because both are important.
Sure. Sure. The biggest thing, I think, within the Regenesis frame, organization has to do its strategized work. And that's the team building that starts at the top, that sets the mission, vision, values, vital few, and then gradually is cascaded down through every individual and separate department and team, so that they each understand how what they do contributes to the wider goals of the organization. So every team should readily be able to articulate how what they're doing now is contributing to the wider and longer term goals of the organization. It's vital that managers don't take their eye off that long term. It's very easy to get kind of almost hypnotized into delivering in the short term at the expense of the long term ability to kind of build for the future. Some organizations, they almost supernova. They go mad trying to over deliver against their available capacity in the short term, and then don't prepare for tomorrow's market and the day after's market. You've always got to be continuously improving, continuously developing, continuously innovating and inventing. So if you neglect that, I'm afraid then what you've done is you've built a short-term organization. And particularly in startups, we see this, where they'll have a great idea, they'll get excellent funding, they'll go like crazy in the inventing phase, but they didn't plan for the long term. What they planned for was to have a really great idea, but they didn't plan to deliver it in the long term. And so they kind of supernova as soon as demand hits and they're then required to deliver too much too soon. They underperform and underdeliver and trash their reputation and disappear basically, and almost catch fire because they're overtrading, and that's a big problem. And that's a classic example where we haven't integrated long-term strategy with short-term goals. If you're a startup, having massive demand at the beginning may not be of service to you. You might be better starting slowly and building progressively from there to make a massive company. And I think the best startups always plan in that way.
Great. So, Thomas, this is a very interesting conversation. I just want to, know if you can share an example of a company that successfully balanced short-term gains and long-term strategy, because that's the most difficult part.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the way I'd like to illustrate this is to give you the exact reverse of what you want so that you can see it more clearly. And the example I'm going to choose is an unusual one. It's going to be in health services. And health service, because it's meant to be there to improve the health of the population. Yet often they will ignore the long-term health and go for short-term treatment of some conditions. And because they don't integrate, they haven't thought about how they could maybe use preventative medicine to and preventative health promotion type techniques to stop their population becoming unwell, becoming sick. They focus too much on the sickness treatment and not enough on the long-term health promotion. And as a result, the population isn't encouraged to develop the right habits to keep them well most of their lives. And so many health economies now have gone the other way. They cannot meet the short term demand. They've allowed so many people to become so unwell that they rush round trying to put more and more money into the short term problem of fixing the illness that the lack of health has allowed to grow. Terrible problem. So that would be the example I would give, where there's just a complete failure in many health economies to invest in long-term health creation. It's ever so difficult to turn around. And so it is within organizations. If your short-term gains are really out of line with your long-term strategy, well, you can have a short-term organization. And for managers that kind of go with that, you're always going to be moving jobs because the one you're in is going to keep failing, which is sad and bad, but it's the reality.
Thomas, one more thing just coming in our mind that, we all know that long-term strategy is very, very important, particularly for sustainability, then only organization will sustain. But I will say that how manager can communicate this thing effectively to particularly to those stakeholders who are interested in short-term gains, because that is a great challenge for the managers. So if you can focus a little bit on that and elaborate on that, that will help to a lot of CEOs who is facing this type of problem.
Absolutely. And I think it's almost a correction that we need to get delivered within capitalism almost. We have now a short term demand to make money for stakeholders in so many organizations. And, the shareholders' benefits this year must be bigger than last year and bigger than last year and so on. But really, that short termism gone mad. And we must make sure when we get our stakeholders, particularly the board members, that they are interested in the genuine long term gains. The best organizations are talking about a 50-year vision. And that's very different from a 12 to 18 months short term stakeholder gain. We really need to focus on that. And I think what we need to look for to managers is firstly, we need managers to come back to the fore. We've kind of put them to one side. We've kind of had this story emerge, which is leadership, getting to people to do things. We say leaders do things right and managers do things in the right way. Actually, both leaders and managers need to do both things right. They need to do the right things and do things in the right way. And the right things are usually sustaining and having a long-term vision. Certainly at least 10 years, preferably more towards 50 years for the organization, so that its role in society is much more clear to all the people who work within. And then to break that back down, to almost come backwards in time and saying, okay, if this is our long-term vision for how we serve society, serve people, serve the world, serve our business customers, what do we need to be doing now to be creating the building blocks for the people we serve so that we go forward to those ends, rather than just making short-term money. And I think we need to see a realignment even at board level, where we're looking much more to the long term. And we need our directors and our chairman and our board members to say, look, if we've created an organization of worth, which in fact is our legal job, every kind of set of corporate governance and kind of formal organization legislation in the world says you need to act in the best interests of the organization and its customers, and not yourself, not the short termism. So this leads us neatly on to our next subject, which is having a clear power of purpose. How clear is the purpose of your organization? I'm going to stop there because I think this needs opening up with the three of us. Sunil and Rajiv, what do you think we need to talk about here? And what questions can we ask here that will tease this out?
Yes, Thomas, the most important thing that I can think here is that how managers identify and articulate a compelling purpose for their organization, because many of them, they know what they have to talk about, but they are not very sure how to articulate that part. So can you give some tips on that?
Sure. Well, there's some clues always in the formal documentation at the start of the organization. There's what I call its inception moment. This is the day somebody decided that this organization should come into being, its inception day. And on that day, it had a very clear purpose. We're putting together an organization to do this. So, what was the purpose of that moment in time? So we call that its inception point. And often, when you look at the formal documentation of the organization, in many countries it's called the Memorandum and Articles of Association. It will
Yeah.
have a core objective or a core purpose statement. What did that say the day the organization was founded? And it's good to go back to that and then to make sure that the organization then starts to live out its true fundamental purpose. And when we're doing strategize, one of the moments in the workshop is we do what we call a 10 plus 10 purpose statement. We get the senior managers in the organization, or in fact any part of the organization, to say, right, we want 10 words in the next 10 minutes that describe very clearly that a member of public would understand what the purpose is of your organization. So the phrase starts with, the purpose of our organization is to, colon, and then 10 words. And it's a real challenge. Sometimes if we're being generous, we'll allow them to have 15 words. But really, if you can't articulate the purpose of your organizations in 10 or 15 words or less, then I think you're unclear. And it takes some refining. Some organizations will take years to refine their purpose statement. It's really, really crucial.
Uh, Thomas, I believe that purpose of organization is very very important, and the power of that purpose basically binds the employee together. And that should be used not only for retention, engagement, but when you hire the people also, that you should see that that should be like-minded people who can get integrated, who can get aligned with the purpose of that organization. So can you give little brief regarding this so that that can help our listeners to understand it, that how this power of purpose helps the organization to retain, to hire the right person, to engage them, and to retain them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think this is where it's really crucial to inspire your employees to your highest purpose as an organization. I mean, it really does matter. If an employee can come and say, I've got a job with this organization, it makes me really proud to think that I am honoring this purpose. I'm serving this purpose in the world, helping other people do whatever it is that's the purpose of the organization. So I think it's so key. And sometimes we think what we're doing is we're giving people a job, we're giving them an activity. It's directionless and meaningless without purpose. So having a clear purpose that we can all be proud of being a part of is part of the kind of mystique and the fame of a really great organization. If you think of the very best organizations you've ever worked with, it's clear they serve you, they serve the world in some way. And I'm sure we can all think of some very good organizations that fit that mold. If if the purpose is either not available or it's unclear, or even if it's a bit negative, then yeah, are we really going to want to go and work for that organization? I think it's really something worth thinking about.
Yeah, I think the most important point is, how can managers ensure that their organization's purpose remain relevant and impactful over the long term?
This connects to, in fact, the next area we need to perhaps talk about, which is adaptability and resilience. But for sure, they need to keep revisiting. Most purpose statements, this kind of highest purpose, the mission statement, as it's sometimes called, needs to be continuously revised. Language changes, the priorities change. The fundamental essence of the mission doesn't really ever change. And organizations that do try to change their fundamental mission and start to operate out of their inception point usually run into trouble because they split their effort. And the best example I've got at the moment, I think I mentioned this the other week, which is a retailer that was famous for its furniture and food retailing operations, suddenly decides to get out into house rental. They weren't equipped to do that. And they thought they could uh, furnish buildings that they bought with the furnishings that they sold in their retail operation, but it wasn't as easy as that. Actually, letting houses is a completely different business to retail, and they simply weren't equipped. They had to buy in all the skills, all the expertise before they could even start trading. And even when they start trading, they couldn't do it very well because nothing about the organization was able to support it. So there's a really good example of, again, choosing how to get it wrong. Uh, in terms of adaptability and resilience, the business landscape, the changing technologies, and this resilience is more important than ever. We need to adapt, but we also need to be true to some of the things we've already talked about. Our inner values, if we care for our employees, if we care for the public, we need to make sure we don't make drastic changes that are good in the short term because it creates lots of money for our shareholders, at the expense of our stakeholders. And our employees and even our customers can be our stakeholders who suffer when maybe customer services are cut to make more money for our shareholders. But the stakeholders, the customers and the staff that we used to employ, we no longer uphold their livelihoods because they can't get service or they no longer have a job. These are all problematic things. So we need to have a care, almost a love for our fellow humans in the way that we run our business, both to serve them in the way that we do our business, but also to look after them once they become our employees. So adaptability and resilience also goes hand in hand with care, as does robust risk management processes, contingency plans to think about how to mitigate the impact of potential disruptions and potential changes on our people and our operation going forward and our customers. Because in lots of areas now, it's almost as though there's a gradual slide into less good service once again. Although I have to say, in India, it's the spearhead of global quality customer services and quality ways of doing things. So the more we can support it, the better. So let me stop there again, and let's have a think about how we can keep a competitive edge over the long term.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. And Thomas, again, I keep on asking you for sharing the examples because I think that's the most relevant thing because only then people can get the flavor of what Regenesis is all about. So, can you provide an example for the organization that successfully demonstrated adaptability and resilience in the face of unexpected challenges? Because that's where most people fail.
Yeah. I think now we'll go for a big name for a change as an example. One of my favorites is Apple. How it has repeatedly been challenged with other technology firms that have seemingly been about to overturn its dominance in the market. But I have to say, I'm always really impressed how they somehow need to, or they seem to retain their ability to be personal to the individual user by being adaptable to whatever's happening in the marketplace, to whatever their customers need. They'll bring out a new component on their technology, either their computers or their phones or some other piece of kit. And it becomes very personal. Having been an Apple user for some years, I'm always impressed by how their products often feel more like a friend than a product. It's so personalized to me as an individual that it feels like almost like a good friend almost. Yes, it's inanimate. It's a piece of technology, and increasingly it has AI driving it, but it doesn't feel like that. Whereas I've used other pieces of technology kits, other computer makes, and it feels just like a computer to me. Very clever, maybe, but it just feels like a computer. Now, how do they do that? It's worth looking at some of the way they deal with their challenges in the marketplace and how they hung on to their dominance, particularly in the mobile phone market. Very interesting company.
Thomas, I think we all know that as far as adaptability and resilience is concerned, these are the two important parameters a team should have, and that is basically important for the success of the organization, success for the team. But I have come across that a lot of managers faces this challenge to develop that culture, because we all know that awareness is there. People are aware that yes, this should be there, but how to foster that culture, that is a challenge. So can you focus a little bit more regarding how to focus that culture of adaptability and resilience in the team as
Sure,
well?
sure. And this goes back to what the three of us know as our Genesis process. It all starts right at the beginning in the aligned people. So, number one, are we helping every individual, every manager, every direct report to the manager, and so on through the organization? Are we helping people surface their long term personal life and work goals? Um, and are we then helping them dovetail that with the work that we have in our organization? Second step then is to do the strategized work. It only needs doing once every 12 or 18 months, but are we doing the team building so that every team takes a little bit of time out uh, or over a series of meetings to build their own sub vision to the organization's higher vision, their own sub purpose to the organization's higher purpose, their own vital few, the key areas for action to bring those two things about that they've just worked out. And then their values, how will we work together and behave together as colleagues, and how will we work with others? So our values need to be sorted out, what we're going to prioritize in terms of our values and behaviors. And then finally, to make sure our action plans are consistent, short and long term. So that's the strategize. And then we need to really make sure that individuals are clear about how what they do contributes to the wider goals of the organization. And secondly, how what they do fits alongside what other people are doing to contribute to the wider goals. And for managers, there's that third question we talk about sometimes, which is how does what I do as a manager help people at the sharp end or towards the sharp end, wherever that is in an organization, do their jobs better? Because that is the only way a manager can help, well, can create value. Because once you become a manager, you stop doing part or all of your frontline work because you have to spend your time on being a manager. And so the only way you can make that pay back is to make life better for your employees and enable them to become better performing employees as well. So helping them do their jobs better. So all of that is there. And then within that, once you've got that culture of kind of working together established, to then help everybody begin to innovate. How do we move forward? How do we become flexible and adaptable? How do we take advantage of new ideas, which every employee is capable of having? And how do we then take forward the best ones and turn those into organizational practicalities and policy going forward? So, yeah, for sure, all of that, all of that.
Okay.
Yeah, the important point now is, the how the management play in building organization resilience and adaptability. What role does the management play?
I think every manager needs to be signed on to this cycle. There's an annual cycle, I believe, that goes through three phases every year. The first is align people, which is the one we just talked about. The other is maximize flow, which is all about how work is designed to deliver us being our best self in our best products, our best services. What does that look like? And have we actually designed it consciously as managers? Uh, have we then aligned money to our activity properly? Or are there at odds? You'll often find an organization working hard to serve its customers is then um, hamstrung by the lack of cost or by too much cost cutting. And there's not a sense that there's no dialogue in there to open all that. And then are people between departments working together or are they in conflict? again, they're set up by their own senior managers, have different priorities, and they're pulling against one another. And then finally, what about our communication inside? Does that all line up? So this whole maximize flow area is there that then makes it possible if you get aligned people and maximize flow sorted, and that's the big focus areas of the Genesis. You can then get to the third focus areas later in the year, which is all about catalyzing the growth. Because once you've laid the foundations, only then can you get ready to grow. And without that, I don't think you can go there. And I think the engine for that is always innovation and evolution. So maybe we should focus there next. So let's move to some questions in that area and see what we can open out.
Yeah, I think
So
Thomas.
Rajiv, there is one question from the audience. Can I bring it now, or will take it at the end, Thomas?
Well, let's take it now. It's probably best for the person who's raised the question.
Yeah. This is the question: how can company encourage employees to think beyond their individual roles and consider their broader impact to key the impact they can have on the organization legacy?
Okay. So
This is
how
from
can
Ranjit.
you encourage employees to think about their beyond their individual roles and consider the broader impact they have on the org. I think this, I'm sure Rajiv and Sunil will have something to say on this too, is a crucial role of the manager. They either enable employees to think beyond their individual roles because they brief them about the bigger picture. They help them understand the value of their work to the wider organization, their importance to the customer, just their little bit. And so they really begin to get a picture of how it all works together. Or they cannot do that, and effectively, they're disabling their own
Hello.
employees if they don't do that work. So, Sunil, Rajiv, what would you say about this particular question?
Yeah, I think I'll quickly pitch in because uh, the employee always have a tendency to look at their individual roles and consider their, own perspective. But it is for the leader to actually, take them to the broader horizon and show them what the organization is all about, what's the mission, and how their contribution can create a lasting impact on the organizational legacy. And also, my personal tip is, try and motivate them regularly and make them part of your story, because only then they start aligning their personal roles and goals with the organizational goals.
Sure,
Sunil,
absolutely. Sunil, you got any comments on this area?
you are on mute, Sunil.
Hello.
That's better. Hi,
Yeah, yeah,
Hello.
we can hear you.
we can hear you now.
Sunil seems to be having a little
Hello.
problem with his sound. Hello, can
Yes,
you
yes,
hear
yes.
us? Okay,
Yes. Yeah, we move on. Yeah, Thomas.
yeah. Let's move on. I see also we have another question,
Hello.
which is we have one doubt. If you don't
Hello.
mind, can you discuss about future technology? And I just want to pick that up. One of my favorite expressions about anything new is just because we can doesn't mean we should. And I think that's a really important answer to future technology. And this is where the long term vision that we've been talking about comes into play. Without the long term, the short term answer is let's do the shiny new toy. Let's bring in the shiny new bit of technology that's promised the earth. Whether or not it'll
Yep.
deliver in the long term, we do it anyway. And I think people are beginning to have more and more concerns about the long term impact for organizations on the over early and the inappropriate introduction of what we call future technology. Customers are saying, my experience is so downgraded now, I'm leaving this company and I'm going to one that's still got humans where that I can speak to. For example, I hear a lot of that in my travels around the world. So certainly, uh, I think we do need to discuss. There's a lot needs to be talked about. So remember that expression: just because we can doesn't mean we should. And maybe we should look at the pros and cons for all our stakeholders, not just our shareholders. I see lots of technology being implemented because it cuts the human labor costs to almost zero. And that's the wrong reason. Great short term for the shareholders, but not so good for the long term for either the company or its stakeholders. So, Rajiv, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the way we should look at it, because the future technology, how it's going to evolve, it's a very dynamic world. Every day we are getting something new which is coming in terms of technology. Lots of startups, they are actually focusing on creating new technologies. So how to keep a tab on it, how to keep utilize those technologies for the benefit of your organization, how to utilize it for the benefit of your own self. I think that's where all managers need to focus on, and maybe spend a lot of time on understanding those technologies and taking advantage of that.
Absolutely. And I think we're beginning to drift into our next subject area, which is really the ethics of management and social responsibility. And I think it's really, really important. And we must be careful that capitalism and that business in general does not drift away too far from the essentials of life. I used to have an artist friend. His name was Ronald Howell. He was a very, very accomplished artist and spent his lifetime observing how the world worked. But one of the things he used to often say when he heard a piece of news, he'd say, well, can I sit on it? Can I eat on it? Can I eat it? And will it keep me warm and dry? And he said, if the answer to all of those questions is no, why should I worry about it? And it was a good riposte to so many good ideas. Not always, but it was a good reminder to say, are we truly looking after the essentials of life, which are those things? Can I eat it? Will it keep me warm and dry? Can I sit on it? They're all very important aspects that we all need to have a decent and kind of competent life, as it were, where we're able to look after ourselves. And add to that other things as well, like hydration, good quality water. So many of those things can easily be lost. Um, and I think it goes back to what we said just a moment ago. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. So we, as managers, I think we all have a responsibility to lead with that integrity. And that goes back to mission, vision, values, and vital few. That needs to be shared amongst all so that there's a unanimous agreement. It is possible to build the greatest companies by getting that right. Because everybody, all the employees, will sign up to be kind of soldiers in the kind of fight to improve the life for people around the world, to improve the world itself, so that it's safer and more sustainable place for us. Without, all the conflicts that we can bring into the world. And currently, there's quite a lot to be concerned about. It's one of the reasons why we're taking Regenesis into what we believe to be the frontier country of the world. Growth in India is probably just about the fastest anyway. And also the innovation is massive. So that's why we brought Regenesis. And we would like more and more people to join the network now so that we can begin to kind of put what we know and these kind of very simple systems, but powerful systems, into more organizations. We're sure could grow a lot and could do a lot more in the world. There's a lot of good to be done. Okay, let's have some questions about ethical management.
So, yeah, Thomas, one question which comes to my mind is, how can managers ensure that ethical considerations are given due weight in decision-making process? Because that's where it's a two-way sword. So people are very confused. So can you throw some light on that?
Well, absolutely, and that's very interesting on the back of the um, question that we've just answered is the kind of notion that the world is sure it's a complex place and it's going to evolve, and the only way we can think about that is trying to step back a little bit and say, right, what are the essentials that we need to make sure we take care of, um, and the ethical considerations absolutely crucial. Uh, we must make sure that they are properly given due weight in the decision making uh, process. So there's a lot being done now in terms of the way even boards work. There's the ESG framework, it's called, which is environment, sustainability, and governance. Um, needs to be brought in from the very top of the organizations and fed down through the managers down to all the employees. And we need to give these things proper weight and think about this long term. Any organization that's thinking short term, yep, you might be famous, you might even be successful in the short term, but in the long term, the prospects could become quite bleak. I was reading an article today just to take environment. There's some people now talking 3+ degrees of heating in the world in the next 30 years. A lot of the scientists are talking about that. If that happens, there's so many places that are going to become uninhabitable. And if we allow that to happen, we've got things really wrong here. Just as an example, assuming you believe in that, of course, uh, the scientific opinion seems to be there. So there's just one ethical area that needs due weight in the decision-making process.
Thomas, in
So,
my
no, are you
view,
back with us yet? Have you got your audio restored?
yeah, I'm so sorry. Thomas, in my view, that in order to promote this ethical management, it is very, very important to define this accountability within the organization and bring the transparency. So, can you focus a little bit more regarding the role of transparency and this accountability in order to promote the ethical management?
Sure, sure. And I think it's all about measuring success beyond the bottom line.
Yeah.
While financial performance is undoubtedly important, it's not the only measure of success when it comes to achieving our long term vision and legacy. We must look way beyond and consider that long term. And when I'm working with organizations, or when we're working with organizations using Regenesis, it's it's almost impossible to think about the long-term success of your outfit, the 50-year vision, without considering those kinds of things, because you have to begin to say, well, what happens if we don't correct some of the negative trends we've got running in our industry, in our sector, even in our society, or even between countries we've got running at the moment. I mean, goodness sake, there's enough difficult things going on right now that I'm sure if we work together across all managers across the world, we could begin to change the course of, because it's our decisions as managers day to day. They may seem small, but actually add it all together and work at in collaboration to make such a difference. And that's what the Regenesis Network is all about. It's about joining managers together and enable them to talk together and work together. So they've got a real kind of roadmap to follow going forwards, which we're going to come on to uh, in a moment. But let's just stop here on some of this beyond the bottom line. So, what are your thoughts beyond the bottom line, Rajiv and so on?
Yeah. So, the uh, conflict always is there between how to manage the profitability and also think about the social responsibility. So there's a very thin line where people are struggling. So Thomas, I can quickly ask you, how can managers ensure that a non-financial matrix are given appropriate consideration along with the financial matrix, because that's, I think, a crucial question.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, And it's the only way we need to begin to think about new measures that guide our hands, because we're now not taking responsibility just for our maybe our team or our department. If we're beginning to work together better across our whole company, then we can actually play a bigger role in society. And I think the more the managers can work across the Genesis network and work together, the more we can achieve. It's amazing how much a small group of managers can achieve on this side, for sure.
I think Thomas, one more important thing is that when we measure the bottom line. So apart from bottom line, it is very very important to measure the employee engagement, their satisfaction level, customer loyalty, customer satisfaction, environmental sustainability, social impact. So
Yeah,
these parameters are very, very important for the long-term goal of the organization. So can you recommend or can you give some example of non-financial metrics that organization use to gauge their long-term success?
sure, sure. And I think you've just talked about some of them. We need to redefine our role as something small and insignificant to something much more long term and bigger and more importance to the world. And I think that's both as managers, we're here to try and use our resources at our disposal in the best possible way and to build the future for the long term. So, what does that look like? Well, I think India is already has some fascinating statistics. It's already reduced the people who are at a level of poverty from 11% to 5% since 2010 or 11, I think, which I think is a stunning achievement. It's a massive thing to have done. And we need to have things like that as landmarks on our kind of collective goals as businesses and organizations. And I do think we've got a bit lost. There's too much talk about money, and money is not a thing. Money is meant to be a representation of value that flows between people and societies and communities and countries. It's not meant to be a thing of it in its own right. And now we have products and services that are money being used to create more money. There's no other involvement, and that's its entire process. Well, we can't eat money, we can't sleep on money, we can't. It won't keep us warm and dry. Well, not unless we pile ourselves in heaps of paper stuff. But it's not real. It's not never going to happen. So I think we need to refocus some of those areas where we're focused on, and think about the well-being of our employees and the health, the long-term health of the communities in which we operate, and how what we do contributes to that. I think there's a whole new debate, and I would love it if more and more managers. Well, I do love it as more and more managers become involved in that discussion.
I think, Thomas,
So,
now I'd like to add one thing that, globally also for countries' performance, apart from GDP, we are talking happiness index. So similarly at workplace also, the organization is talking regarding work-life balance and happiness index of the employee. Those things
yeah,
are very, very important things. Yeah.
sure. And what we're beginning to talk about here is a roadmap where the managers that are there now today, all of us, we need to be starting to build a roadmap now for those who follow. And I'm very aware that we're running into the end of our hour. It always seems to go so quickly, but we'll be returning to this conversation again and again, I'm sure, about how do we leave that roadmap for those who follow, and what are the things that we leave in it. And some of the things you've just mentioned, Sunil, are obviously part of that story. We need to make sure that our impact on the world is positive. So that's enough from me. What I would say is come and join us. Come and join the Genesis Network. Contact any of us, and we will get you onboarded and help you to join in the most appropriate way for you. We'd love to have you as part of the group, and I'm sure as we go forward, more and more people will become involved with the work that we're doing. Any last words, Sunil and Rajiv?
I
Thank you,
think
Thomas. Thank you for your time and the great input. So I'm sure that the viewers must have enjoyed the session, and we will keep doing like this.
Great. Thank
And
you. Thank you so much.
I will encourage everyone to join our community to come forward and join Regenesis. You can get in touch with any of us, and I'm sure that'll be a great value for money for you.
Great. Thank you both. And as always, another interesting and fast-moving conversation. Prem, back over to you.
Thanks for that, Thomas, Rajiv, Sunil. In fact, an inciting session that we had. Great points to be noted. Uh, it is very important that you leave a legacy on the succession plan that you have. People definitely look at, you have discussed some of the pointers where when people leave the organizations, many of them are discussed and that legacy stays with that organization for the work that they have done. Great insights on that. With this, we come to a conclusion of our session for today. Thanks, Rajiv, Sunil, and Thomas. Our next session is about soft skills on the 21st century, done by Aarti Sharma, which is scheduled for tomorrow. And the session is at the same time. We are streaming this session across YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn in parallel. The session goes live on LinkedIn and the other three platforms. It's streamed live. So to join us tomorrow with this session, we would like to conclude. Rajiv, thanks again. Thomas, Rajiv, and Sunil, thanks again for joining us today. Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Prem.
Prem. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And
Yeah.
thanks to our
Thanks,
listeners.
everyone.